gathered up the last of the zipper faces as you commanded.
Good boy, Igor. Place them in the coffin along with the beer cans and the foreheads. Then get me as many pencils through the nose as you can find before the sun comes up. Go now, and be quick about it.
Yes, Master, it will be done. Here, Master, there are no more to be found.
That's a lot. It's more than I imagined. Now nail the coffin shut, and bring me those sticks of dynamite.
Yes, Master. Are we doing the right thing, Master?
I dearly hope so, Igor. I dearly hope so. If we can save just one poor soul from falling prey to another bad makeup idea from the internet.
Yes, Master.
Yes.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm fine. Are you selling something?
No.
Good, because I'm not buying anything.
So in this edition of Battles with Bits of Rubber, we're going to talk about two different things. The first thing we want to talk about is how to actually start doing effects. And by this, we don't mean not so much getting into the industry, but specifically how you actually start making things. And we're also going to look at the lowdown on cap plastic.
Yeah.
And I say cap plastic because
two very important things.
Yeah, I say cap plastic I enunciate very clearly because I have had people say cat plastic as if it's made from like freshly squeezed cats. And it's like, no, it's cap plastic. But we'll get to cap plastic in a bit. So how are you today?
I'm feeling way better than I felt yesterday. Let's hope so. I am ready for this to be going. Still catches me a little bit, but I am ready for this bullshit to be gone. A lot more going around than I was aware of. Ugh. At least it wasn't the flu.
No, that's not pretty.
No. I'll sing a song.
So, Todd, what have you been doing with your time since I spoke to you last?
Well, I am just getting started on a production of Into the Woods, where I am doing... There are two actresses that are going to be playing the witch. Debbie Boone. I don't know if you know that name. She was a pop star in the 70s, had a huge hit with a song called You Light Up My Life. She is going to be playing the witch for the first 3 weeks of the production. So I'm doing custom nose, chin pieces for two separate actresses. I'm doing their life casts this weekend, and also doing the wolf, who,
wow, I
already have a cast of him. In fact, you helped sculpt the beast on him.
Oh, that guy.
Last time you were here. Yeah. So I already have a cast of Marcus's face, and getting started on that, and I'm doing a couple of pieces for Smooth On that they're going to take over to London for IMATS in June. Amazing. That I need to get cracked out. And let's see what else. Just a smattering of things. I'm doing some disguise makeup for someone I really can't talk much about, but that's been kind of fun doing some dentures and some hair work. That's been kind of fun.
Oh, John Chambers on me now. You're going to do some CIA
Yes,
stuff.
I could tell you about it, but I'd have to kill you.
How exciting!
Yeah.
Well, I've been getting ready for the UMAE, which is a couple of weeks away. And because of time, because I've not really been busy, what I've decided to do is and because she's available as well, I'm going to do the same, well, not the same makeup, but I'm going to use the same cores as last year, because I already have the molds here, so it makes life a lot easier for me to just,
sure, makes sense
to reuse
stuff you already have.
Well, yeah, I'm going to do a different makeup. Last year was this kind of like, I don't know, white trash kind of, not too healthy looking.
Which I got to tell you, I loved that makeup you did on her, because she's a very pretty girl, and you just did this, nothing special. It wasn't a real crazy creature, but it was just a homely character makeup that if she was walking down the street, you probably wouldn't have even thought twice. But for talking about disguise makeups, that was perfect.
Thank you. No, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and she's. I've got a few people that I want to do some makeups on this time. I mean, this one won't be as extensive, but it's still going to be a full face prosthetic. And again, it's going to be, I'm going to deliberately do something which is not a creaturey thing. It's a realistic kind of, subtle-ish looking makeup, but it's going to be a bit more kind of sinister. Because I want it to be, I don't know, just a bit creepy looking.
Well, I think those kind of makeups can be the most challenging ones because just by its very nature, doing a creature makeup takes you out of reality, so you can pretty much do whatever you want. But if you want to do something, just turning someone into someone else, I think is more of a challenge.
Yeah, so I'm going to get the eyebrows punched again and do all that kind of stuff. So that should be fun. And I'm going to reuse the dentures, I think, as well, because they're really good dentures. And I don't really want to just, although we could probably get another set made up, I just want to see if I can do more with the same stuff.
Sure.
So a different piece, but the same course. So that should be fun. And the other thing I'm doing is I'm prepping for my workshops. I've got some more workshops happening at Pinewood, which is kind of cool. So kind of getting stuff done for that. I have a question regarding UltraCal 30, because we don't really have UltraCal 30 over here.
Okay.
And I'm wondering, I can't remember who it was. And if they're listening to this and they remember it was them that told me, please message me and tell me again, because I want to thank this person directly. I haven't tried it yet. But they was telling me that if you were to mix cement powder with like a hard plaster that we have, like Crystal R or something, you would get something that approximated or very close to UltraCal 30. And I would like to try that out, because if that works, that's amazing.
Yeah. Interesting.
So, I mean, I think it was like a 10 or 15%. So you'd have your powder and you'd have your cement powder, mix those two together and then put them in the water and just mix as normal. It
seems like it would work. I can't imagine.
It seems logical. It seems like it would fit. So I don't know if anyone listening has a bit more chemistry knowledge on that, but I might just buy a bag, just a small bag of cement and try a few batches and just see. It's not going to cost a huge amount of time or money just to experiment and see, because that would be amazing if I did that. Yeah. And then naturally I would do a video about it and spread the love, because that would be amazing. Okay. And the other thing we're looking at,
UltraCal 30 Plasterzilla.
Plasterzilla, it's amazing. We had, the first time I ever had this was for a movie called Mindhunters. And it was, not a great movie, but it was fun to work on. And I think Matthew Mungle had done some live casts, and he'd sent some live casts over. And they were UltraCal 30, and they were like fresh out the alginate, so they still had little imperfections here and there, but it was just like, wow, it's just so hard.
It is good stuff.
So much harder than any plaster we had here.
And if you cover it with plastic as it's starting to cure up so that the moisture stays in there, it's even harder.
Amazing. Oh, it's so good. So I would love to try and get some of that, because it would make a big difference to me, because you could do like a lot of cheaper jobs using that stone instead of a lot of resins, which is quite handy for a lot of colleges and stuff where
Did I tell you what I've been doing with my stone molds when I'm going to be doing a slush latex mask?
I think you said something about doing a skin of
I'll do maybe a half an inch of UltraCal over the sculpture, and then I will back it with maybe another half inch of Freeform Air, the syntactic epoxy dough that Smooth On makes, and because it bonds really well to the UltraCal, and
it bonds well, so you don't need to put any kind of
so you've got this
great
gypsum mold that's still going to absorb all the water from the latex, but it's none of the weight.
Wow, that's pretty good. And you can drill it and bolt it, and so if you have two halves, you could
absolutely
secure the two. Well, that sounds brilliant.
Yeah, well, something I just tried and it worked.
So maybe I should just man up and just do this and mix the Crystal with the thing and just see what happens.
Hell yeah!
I'm going to give that a test, I think, and see what happens.
It's a great idea. I love it.
I will share the results, and like I say, if whoever it was, I can't remember the guy's name, but if you get back in touch with me, I'll mention you in the podcast and thank you, because I have a feeling it's going to be a nice thing to do.
Yeah, well, it certainly makes sense.
And the other thing I wanted to mention was, I think we need to just quickly revisit our Shooting at Meat podcast. If you haven't heard that yet, go look at that one. I think it was number 3 or 4. And it was a while back where Todd.
That was so
you took
fun.
A little party up to the
woods. I wish
woods.
you could have been here when we did that. We probably spent close to $300 on bacon and pork belly. There's a great place in downtown Denver that supplies all kinds of stuff. They even have pig heads, so we could have gotten pretty much close to an entire hog and going wild with it. Hog wild. But we had a great time. I mean, one of the guys that we went shooting with was almost in tears when he realized we weren't going to be able to bring the bacon back home and cook it.
Oh, just a lot of meat.
Yeah.
With holes in. But, yeah.
But
tattooed and stippled with,
yeah. But it was, you want to see what a gunshot looks like through flesh, and pig skin is very close to human skin.
Well, that was the purpose
real.
of the exercise.
Yeah.
That was the purpose of the exercise, to actually directly shoot, flesh and see the result. But then more importantly, to actually mold it and cast it out, because I wanted to see what, the plastiline version would look like as a cast, because that's what a sculpt should look like. And it's invariably when people sculpt stuff, it doesn't look the same as the real thing. And there's a certain amount of kind of creativity and artistic license with sculpting aspects. And it's quite nice to be looking at, the plain real thing and, oh, okay, it looks very understated or very crisp or,
This prosthetic piece that I'm making for Smooth On to take over to the London IMATs was kind of the Revenant inspired. It's a 360 neck piece, seamless, 'cause it's a collapsible core mold, and the tissue damage inside the wounds themselves are actually from those gunshot molds that we made, which is poured clay into those and pieced the stuff together, so it's actual tissue damage that you're seeing in these open wounds.
Amazing.
Looks pretty darn cool.
Oh, I have to look at, I'll be at the show, so it'll be fun to see that on. I'll definitely check that out. So we had a really cool email last week from Kelsey Goebel, and I just wanted to read it out, because I saw that we had some emails, and I saw you replied to this one. It was a good question.
Yeah,
I thought
it was
worth mentioning. I think it's worth mentioning just because it's the kind of thing that not a lot of people think about, or they don't think about until it's too late.
It's a perfect lead in to what we want to, one of the things that we want to talk about today is, what to work on when you're just starting out.
If you have any technical questions or anything you want to hear answered, the thing is, we do get a lot of emails all the time. I'm sure you get, I get them to this, our email here, which is stuartandtodd@gmail.com. But I also get some, to my own address, and just, when you teach a class or something, I always hand out emails and I often get questions through. But once in a while we get a good question, which I think is something that other people would want to hear. And I think this particular one is pretty good. And you did reply, so I think I'll let you read this one out, Todd, because you had some really nice answers for it, for Kelsey's question sculpting.
Thanks. And she says, "Hey guys, I love your work and the podcast is super helpful to me starting out. My question is, where's the best place to stop a single small prosthetic piece for a seamless edge? Say if I only wanted to sculpt a nose, where would you recommend stopping the sculpt to look the most realistic? Thanks so much. Sincerely, Kelsey Goebel." Well, I sent her several images of the sculpture and then the finished makeup in place on an actor, Leonard Barrett Jr., who I've done a number of prosthetic applications on for different shows, and this one was for Man of La Mancha. And I wrote to Kelsey saying, "Hi Kelsey, great question. Every piece is going to be different, even for noses. To fundamentally alter someone's appearance, you don't necessarily need to sculpt the entire nose. It may just be a tip and nostrils, bridge, etc. It'll depend on what the character needs are going to be. Sometimes you can stop the sculpture just under the septum between the nostrils and in the curve of the nostril wing before it going out onto the cheek. Whatever choices you make, the important thing is that the sculpture itself be as thin and unobtrusive as possible, so there's no obvious bulge indicating where the sculpture is, and then the blending edge will be easier to hide. Does this make sense? Cheers, Todd." Haven't heard back from her regarding that answer, but what I had done on Leonard, and we can post some of these pictures also. We just basically, Leonard has a very broad, flat nose. I wouldn't say really flat, but it has a broad nose and it's a rounded tip. And we wanted to give his character, the Cervantes character in Man of La Mancha, a pointier nose tip. So essentially we went up along the bridge of the nose and out on the tip and just created a narrower ridge and pointy nose that blended beautifully just onto the top of his nose. And it changed, the change of his look was dramatic.
It's quite an amazing transformation. And I like to see pieces where, it's like the minimum amount of change has been, added, but it's the right change to give that maximum amount of modification. So, it's quite an economic, in terms of sculpture, it's economic, but it's correctly placed as to, give the most significant change.
And interestingly enough, just changing someone's nose is enough to render them pretty unrecognizable to people that they know. So starting out, learn how to do some simple human anatomy. I think those are the important challenges to master, not the pencil through the nose or a beer can through the forehead. Please don't do those kinds of makeups, people.
So that question from Kelsey that was a good one, and it kind of leads into, as you say, the first topic, which is how to actually start doing effects. And I think that's the thing. A lot of people say they want to start doing it, and it's kind of like, well, if you're interested in starting to do it, then start doing it. But I guess it's what specifically you should do first. And
honestly, I've seen some of these YouTube videos, that by quote unquote makeup artists showing you how to do these really cool things. If you're going to go to the trouble and effort to take several hours to build up on your face, with cotton and latex and paint to do a Joker makeup or whatever the heck it is you're doing, learn how to sculpt so that you've got something that you can reuse, that you can make a mold of and use different casting materials in, whether it's silicone, gelatin, latex. If you're going to go to that trouble, do something that's going to last.
Well, I think as well there is a strand to people that want to kind of do prosthetics, I think, as well, because I've often thought about it from the kind of professional point of view, but there's a lot of people that have no intention of trying to get a job within an industry, so they're not necessarily thinking about it from that angle. Their interest is
Halloween parties and
getting likes on Facebook, probably, but which is fine, but it does spawn a lot of copycats. Someone will do like a kind of a crappy thing, and I say crap. It sounds very mean and kind of mean spirited, but I just mean it's kind of what happens is someone does something like I don't know, a beer can in the face or whatever, and then that's a highly unlikely thing to ever happen, and then someone will do a version of that, and someone does a version of that, and suddenly it becomes like a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy, and suddenly all of these poor choices have been copied and built upon, and it becomes
the zipper face,
kind of a bit of fun
face within a zipper face.
Well, I haven't seen that done, but it just from like a kind of professional point of view, you're kind of thinking, why would there be a beer can in the nose, or a pencil through the nose, or a zip across the why what purpose? It's a fun thing to do, but it's almost like, but yeah, it's a bit confounding. So, but I've had like I'm teaching it in classes and stuff. A lot of people are like asking what they should do first, and I've noticed a bit of a trend with some colleges. I don't know if it's the same in the States, but I've seen a lot of colleges where they're encouraging students to do these very big, kind of extensive makeups, like, well, half the body is covered. There's a huge creature head and there's arms and torso and everything. And then I'll speak to these people at trade shows and stuff, and they've shown me these, they've put a lot of effort into it, and it looks, pretty cool. But then they'll ask me, I had trouble matching the skin tone, or I had trouble getting good edges, and how do you get good edges? How do you match skin tones? And those are very basic and fundamental questions. And they're important to all kinds of prosthetics. So it's kind of like you could figure out how to get good edges and how to make molds better and how to paint skin by doing something like a nose. You didn't need to, stretch yourself over 6 weeks and £1,000 worth of stuff to figure out that's what you don't know. So I would urge people who are going to start by doing small things well first, and then as you gain confidence, you get more sophisticated and you start scaling up. I wouldn't, like, if you'd never run before, you'd be a fool to book yourself into the Boston Marathon and, and turn up on day one with your new sneakers and expect to finish with a good time. You're going to get a mile down the road and collapse.
Yeah, it's kind of a fine line, because you want somebody to work on a project when they're getting started, something that's going to excite them, that's going to keep them interested and focused and want to do it. But at the same time, you don't want them to be biting off more than they can chew early on, because what happens 9 times out of 10 is they wind up getting really frustrated because it doesn't turn out the way they envision it in their mind, and it becomes a colossal failure, and they don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is a crushing thing. And I know that feeling myself. And I've done makeups when I was starting out, and it didn't go the way I wanted it. And I would come back, but there was a definite kind of period of like mourning where you're like, your dream didn't match your vision at all. And it's like, oh God, it didn't match your output. So
Well, what I tell my students, it's to get really good at something is you have to work outside your comfort zone until what you're working on becomes comfortable. And then you push yourself outside that comfort zone again to improve. Mm-hmm. And I think starting out small and getting really good at doing relatively simple things so that somebody could look at it. Perfect example is visual effects work, CGI. When you show somebody your finished CGI work, and this is the kind of stuff I was doing before I started doing practical makeup work, is show somebody your work, and unless you have shown them a breakdown of how everything comes together, the best compliment somebody can pay you when they look at your work is, that's beautiful. What did you do?
Yeah, they don't actually see the effect.
They can't see the effect. That's what you need to strive for with doing makeup effects as well. If, you're showing somebody a cut on a forearm or a scar, they went, oh gosh. You show somebody the beer can in the forehead, well, nobody in their right mind is going to believe that actually happened to somebody.
Yeah, or you get this perfect halo of bruising around the outside that conveniently covers, a crappy edge. It's like,
yeah,
you don't bruise like that, or whatever.
Look at real pictures of actual wounds and try to duplicate that. And
using reference is a big thing, I think.
Oh, it's enormous. I don't know anybody that doesn't. You don't work without reference.
No,
I certainly am not good enough to work without reference.
Yeah, I think that alone would make a good podcast on its own. Actually, is using and how to find good reference. I think we should probably do.
And not just wound reference, but what does a human ear look like? I mean, in my sculpture class, I have students. They've seen human faces every day for their entire lives. But when they try to sculpt something, it's obvious that they have no idea what a human being looks like.
Yeah, you kind of get so used to it, you don't really look anymore. You don't really see it. You just, you kind of switch that off, don't you? Like a lot of things in life.
It resembles a human being, but that's not a real human being.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing of like doing things like, portrait busts and stuff of people's heads. I think that they're valuable exercises because they force you to really look at something that you may be familiar with, even if it's a self-portrait. You will be present when you do your own self-portrait, so you can guarantee you'll turn up.
And be prepared to destroy that sculpture and start over when things don't turn out correct. It's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's okay to start over.
So I think let's break this down into a series of practical steps. I think what I would say is making, I think if you've never sculpted anything before, I think wounds and injuries are good things to start with.
Agreed.
And the reason I think they're good things to do is because if you get it a bit wrong or the edges aren't great, you can kind of put a bit of blood in it or a bit of bruising and hide your errors, and it still looks okay. You've still got something you can take a photograph of and kind of hold your head up high. So I think you could start that. And then as you get more sophisticated and your edges get better, if your edges aren't getting better, well, then there's your problem right there. You've got to research and figure out how to do that.
Making mistakes along the way is a big part of the learning process.
Well, it is. And I think that would be something I would say is to take photographs of everything you do, especially your mistakes, especially the things that go wrong, because then you can show that picture to somebody else and say, why is that like that? And more often than not, you can go to someone like, Neil Gorton's 911 effects page on Facebook and, you'll get, seasoned professionals and stuff, showing you and explaining how things go on. But they can't do that if they haven't got a photograph of it. So, as upsetting as it is to do that, I think when things go terribly wrong, that's a really good thing to take a photograph of and just have like a folder on your phone or your computer or whatever. And you keep all your mistakes. You don't have to show everyone for fun, but it's good to just have a record of them so that you can then, figure out how to solve them.
I was just cleaning out the shop and throwing out some old molds to make room for new stuff. And seeing some of my early molds going, oh my God, what was I thinking? I would never do that the same way.
Yeah.
Knowing what I know now.
No, it's an ongoing, process. And the thing is, you end up learning, you are interested in the subject, so you're going to actively look for, alternatives all the time, and you're constantly finding new things. So that never changes. The better you get, the better you want to be, and you end up just chasing this dragon. So, you got to make comfort with and get comfortable with that sensation of never quite getting it right. But,
I think that's improve. The nature of being an artist too. And I think we've talked about it before. We're never going to be satisfied with our work, which doesn't mean we can't look at our work and go, yeah, that's pretty good. But lets us know we're still on the right track when we know we could have done a better job. No matter how good we get, we could have always done something different to make it even better.
I would also say that it's a good idea to get familiar with successful and good artists in this field, or indeed, just art generally. But it's good to look at the work of people like, Jordu Shellstuff and, you can see Aaron Sims and, there's loads of very good people, who do amazing work. Mike Hill stuff, and get an idea of what is already currently considered, the best now, and look at that and go, wow, this is already being done by people, so that once it's kind of like if you were going to run a marathon or going to be an Olympian or something, you'd want to know what the current furthest throws or the fastest times were, because that's what you're going to work to if you want to improve it. And it's kind of, I think it's similar with art. It really helps to look at the current state of things, because I'll when I teach a class and, that we're sculpting something and someone's not happy with what they're doing, and then you mention, oh, have you seen, Jordu stuff or something? They've never heard of it. I'm like, well, if you want to know this stuff, you should know, who the industry leaders are, so that you can,
absolutely,
have a look, and then you can kind of have like a sliding scale of like, really, really bad and really, really good. And then where do you sit along that continuum?
Yeah. Well, if
you don't have a realistic,
if creatures is what you want to do, here's a list of people who excel at creature design and creature makeups. If you're interested in likenesses, here's a list of guys that are brilliant at capturing the essence of celebrities or look-alike.
I mean, some of that Mike Hill stuff is just,
oh my God,
good. I mean, the Rick Baker doing the makeup on the American Werewolf in London is like two full-size figures of Rick Baker putting on the werewolf transformation makeup. But it's a statue. You can walk around it, and it looks like
Mike Hill doing Jack Pierce,
putting on the Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, the creature makeup.
Yeah.
It's just, ridiculous. So it's ridiculously good, and you need to see that to kind of go, oh, okay, and it kind of raises in your head, what's good. But it also helps you to kind of go, but that's made by a human being, and that was learned, and they have skill, and it's something that you can work towards. So
I guarantee
it's good to have a good idea.
For the first sculpture that Mike Hill tried probably wasn't as good as the stuff that he's turning out now.
Yeah, that's the thing. It is a practice. It is your practice. It is something you apply yourself to and do regularly. But it is, again, I think that's part of it, is to know what good art is, so you can kind of place yourself, rather than just say, well, I did it, so it's terrible, and beat yourself up with this imaginary stick. It's like, well, actually, it's not that bad, or it's better than it was. But again, if you haven't taken photographs of your work to record it because you weren't happy at the time,
learn to know the difference between good work and poor work. And there's an awful lot of poor work out there on the internet being paraded around as good work.
And I think that's the thing. That's partly why I'm saying, like, look at these, what is good work. I mean, I guess you could always argue stuff's a matter of opinion, but when you look at some like the Mike Hill stuff, you go, no, this is good work. There's no way that, you could consider that to be, overhyped. That is amazing stuff. So it's good to know what good work is, because then when someone, does something that's terrible, you can kind of call them on and go, well, that's not done well. That doesn't necessarily deserve to be followed.
Even among zipper faces, there are good zipper faces and horrible zipper faces. But I think
they're all unnecessary.
Is don't do zipper faces. Please. Learn something different. Learn something real. Like, what does a .45 caliber gunshot exit wound actually look like?
on a zipper face.
on a zipper face.
I guess the other thing you could try doing is it does help if you've got a face cast as well, or a section of a face cast. I'm trying to think who makes and sells casts that you can sculpt on. I'm pretty sure, is it Michael Mosher?
Michael Mosher? No, it's David Mosher.
David Mosher, beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Who's the bull cap? Because I bought a DVD of a bull cap application.
That's Michael.
That's Michael Mosher. Okay. So that was the next DVD.
By the way, that his DVD is spectacular.
I bought it. It's amazing.
It's really
so good.
is good.
It's well worth it. It's very, very good. David Mosher.
Mm-hmm. I think CFX also sells some foam busts that you can sculpt on. But David Mosher has them. I know there are
links. We'll put some links in the blog post about this in the show notes as well, because that would be good. And the other ones when I was in New York a couple of years ago, I went to the Complete Sculptor, which was, the amazing sculpture.
Oh my
shop.
God, what a candy store.
Oh, I didn't want to leave. My wife was like, we're going now. I'm like, no, I don't want to go. It was amazing. And, they had, like little vacuum faces, but they weren't like the crappy, like blank face masks that you get in like, Michael's or whatever, or, Hobby Lobby or something. They were like proper, very hard, very thick vacuum plastic, and you could kind of sculpt on them. There was like a whole face. And I was like, wow, these are really good, and you need more of those. So I think they sell them there. So you want something like that. I guess at a push, you could maybe use like a styrene, one of those kind of hat stand styrene heads.
Yeah, but I think they're back forming them out of ABS, like 1/8" ABS. So they are really, really solid.
Yeah, that's what you need. And I guess you could always back it up with plaster and make, your own plaster versions to sculpt on if you want to use them as a mold.
Sure.
That'd be a neat idea. And then you can kind of skirt. But yeah, if you want, another thing that occurred to me would be to sculpt up. Like we spoke to with Jeff in the last podcast. He was talking about, sculpt something and then paint it. You don't have to mold it. You can at least practice your sculpting.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can even paint monster clay.
And then just wash it off with some, hot water or something and then reuse it.
Yeah.
I mean, what I did a video of something similar where I sculpted a lizard texture. It's the lizard texture video. And then sprayed it with cat plastic. Sprayed it with cat plastic and then painted it with acrylics. And then you just grab the edge of where the cat plastic was, peeled it off, and it was clean, and then you could just reuse your clay again. But there's something about just sculpting and practicing your sculpting that I think you don't have to mold everything you sculpt.
Sculpt.
Yeah, sculpt it, take photos, and then do more. Get some advice, get some opinions, and from people that are going to listen and look. And this is why I think there's a Makeup Effects forum page on Facebook is a good place for that. You throw that stuff up and you'll
start
get
building
you may get
morgue of reference images
and making little maquettes or little scale models of things and painting them. Again, you don't need to mold them; you can just sculpt them. I think it's good to just sculpt various appliances on face casts and just photograph the finished pieces, and then you can just reuse the plastiline and resculpt another one. Just keep going.
Yeah. If you're starting out, I think working with a water clay like wed clay or just any of the water clays is a good way to be able to start pushing clay around quickly and block in some forms to get shapes. I think a lot of it's just doing studies. Don't try to do something finished that you're going to keep. Experiment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when we were at college in my second year, it was like a 6 or 7 week session. We did it like 1 or 2 days a week, and they would have a model. They paid for a model to come in and just sit, and we would each have calipers to measure, and we would have a plumb line we'd make, and you'd measure and take measurements off the head. We did a life size head and neck of this lady that sat, and it was a very, very tough thing to do, but it was a really useful exercise because it taught me about how like the nose, gradually becomes the cheek, and the cheek becomes the chin, and the chin becomes the neck, and there's no cessation where the one feature stops and the next one begins. They all kind of move into the next thing. So, it was good to do that. So I think sculpting, even just a face, your own face. Like I say, you're going to be there when you sculpt, so you can guarantee you're present. So, if you've got a mirror and a bag of clay, you can sort of start doing a self-portrait. I think that's a good thing to do. So,
and pay attention to where things go on the face. I mean, there are just formulaic how to know how wide to make a mouth and how far apart you put the eyes and where the nose sits and where the ears go on the side of the head. And this is all very, very easy to figure out, and getting them placed right is going to help you get a long way toward getting something that looks the way you want it to look. Learn the anatomy. Learn the anatomy.
Do that again.
Learn the anatomy. Learn the anatomy. In a world where anatomy was bad. In a world.
So let's wrap up this first topic with just a quick a breakdown to kind of bullet point what we've just said.
Bullet point.
I think
start out small.
Bullet point. Start out small. Do small stuff well, and then scale up as you go. And it doesn't need to be sophisticated stuff. You could just sculpt something in plasticine. What you get from like an art store. Plastiline is better. But plasticine will start you off. Do something small. And you can mold it in plaster and, make them in latex just to start with. That's how I started, was that, because those are pretty inexpensive materials. You've got to spend some money. If you want to make a meal, you have to buy ingredients. Yep. You're going to have to spend some money, but you don't need to buy the best of everything. But a little bag of plaster and a bit of plastiline is not expensive. And, that'll get you on your feet. And all the things you do with those materials, you basically will do them. Those principles are throughout the entire process. So they're valuable things to start doing. Start small and scale up as you go. I would suggest doing casualty stuff like wounds if you're going to make appliances, because then you've got somewhere to go if you make mistakes with the blood and the bruising. And then as you get better and more confident, try and get away from the blood and the bruising and make it cleaner. And then start trying to do stuff like features like noses. Noses are a good thing to do, I think.
Is a great place to start. It's right.
Because they're very hard to do well.
And everybody has one. Most people have a nose.
Sculpting and then, like I say, photograph stuff and then reuse the plastiline and just keep using. That's the good thing about plastiline, it's reusable.
Over and over again. And just don't it's easy to get frustrated when things don't turn out the way you want them to, but don't give up.
It's a very, private hell that happens when something like a creative endeavor, because you're doing it because you enjoy it and you want it to look good and you have such high hopes and intentions for this thing. And it's a good thing, it's not like you're trying to screw someone over or kill someone. You're trying to create a piece of art. It's a noble pursuit. So it's very disappointing when it doesn't go the way it should. And when that feeling comes, you need to know you're in good company, because everyone that's made anything has felt that. Yeah. And that, even though it feels unique to you in that moment, it's not unique. And I had it this week. And you kind of learn to live with it, but it's never something that always goes away. So don't feel like, you are a failure or that you are wrong because something hasn't gone right. It's just, it's an event. It's not you. It's a thing. It's outside of you. So, you can drop that like unwanted luggage, frankly. Yeah, it is a process, and you have good days and you have bad days.
Yeah, I'm sure that the witch and the wolf makeups that I've got to sculpt for Into the Woods will go through at least a couple of iterations before I get what the director is looking for. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping I will be close coming out of the gate, but it's a process. It's you try something and see how it's going to work. The actor's going to have to wear it, so it needs to be functional as well as look right. I'm about to break out my stash of Girl Scout cookies.
We don't have those over here.
Oh, would you like me to send you some?
Can you do that?
Why not?
I'd love that. I've never had Girl Scout cookies. They're the kind of thing I see in like movies and stuff, but it's not really something we have over here.
Oh, they're yummy. I'll send you a box of Thin Mints and a box of Samoas.
So on to our second topic, which is cat plastic.
The lowdown.
The lowdown on cat plastic. So for those of you who are not familiar with cat plastic, it is literally a vinyl plastic I'm guessing it comes as a kind of a pellet form initially, and then is
pellet
kind
or
of
a powder.
pellet or a powder, and then it's kind of soaked in usually acetone to melt it into like a liquid, and then that's how you buy it. You buy it as like a thick concentrate liquid, and it's basically used for painting onto head-shaped forms, and then it's made into bald caps. So if someone's got hair and they want them to look bald, you'd stick a cap on their head, and that's why it's called bald cap plastic.
Two types. Now there is an alcohol-soluble cap plastic that is very nice, that is used quite a lot for encapsulating silicone gel prosthetics.
And I think that's worth pointing out to people who are like, when you arrive a little later to the party and you see all these different kinds of cap plastics, and it can seem very confusing. Something to bear in mind is that they're all essentially very similar. It's kind of like going into a store and seeing, different kinds of spreads or colas or whatever. Chemically, they're very, very similar. So you don't need to get too hung up on. There are going to be some that are better than others, but a lot of them, there may be benefits you're not necessarily going to notice unless you're working at a very high level. And so when you're starting out, you're still trying to get your head around everything. I wouldn't get too hung up on the different brands, because there's Baldies and Super Baldies, and there's Glatzan, and
Bald Effects, and Michael Davies got one called Watermelon,
which I've never used, but I've heard good things about it. But that's a water-based cap plastic, isn't it?
Yep, but it is alcohol soluble once it's dried.
So we should probably we'll focus mainly on the two main types, the acetone and the alcohol-based cap plastic. I think that might be something to do like a video on. I think as well. It could be quite nice to actually show the benefits of this stuff.
There's a bit of a caveat with the alcohol-soluble cap plastics. If you're using alcohol-activated palettes to paint, you need to be careful about using too much, because you can literally burn a hole in the cap plastic, revealing whatever material is underneath, whether it's a silicone gel or somebody's hair. And if you're using it as a bald cap, and you are gluing the person's hair down with some kind of hair gel, if that hair gel has alcohol in it, it's actually going to eat through the cap.
Yeah, so beware.
Yeah, be careful.
So I guess the story with cap plastic is, like I say, was used for making ball caps pretty much exclusively. That's all ball cap plastic was used for, was making ball caps, hence the name. But then when, silicon became a material that people were using for appliances instead of foam latex, most people were using ball cap plastic to make ball caps. And so, the acetone solvent that it was used with was perfectly right. But now a lot more cap plastic is getting used for appliances. So it's going under eyes and around, on the face more. I think people were like, this whole acetone near the eye thing, that's not good. Is there a way we could formulate a cap plastic that uses a less aggressive solvent? Hence the Super Baldies kind of phenomena, which is, it's basically the same kind of thing, but it just uses alcohol instead of acetone as a solvent. So,
the Super Baldies, I think, is stretchier.
Yeah, it has a much more flexible. Yeah, the alcohol cap plastic. I mean, it is a lot more kind of flexible. But I wonder if that's just because there's a plasticizer they've added to it that they could add to the standard Baldies, and that also would be as flexible.
I don't know. Something to look into.
So maybe, fellas, if you're making that stuff, is that something we could look into? Because I'm wondering as well whether like putting oils in it would make any difference. This came up a little bit on the 911. I was thinking, I wonder if you could add something. And I think Neil mentioned maybe putting a bit of lavender oil in it or something. Again, it's something that just needs to be tested, because if you could put some oil into it, a small amount, I'm saying, just a few drops, whether it would make it more flexible. But obviously the concern is it would also stop glues or the silicone from bonding to it. So,
right.
But yeah, the Super Baldies or the alcohol-based one seems to be a lot more flexible. And that's very, very nice. Yeah, with regards to airbrushing it, I tend to thin mine quite a lot. I mean, I thin it probably about 5 or 6 parts solvent to 1 part cap plastic.
That's close to what I do as well.
Because I would rather it was too
I'm
runny.
still a little leery of running it through an airbrush, even a single action airbrush, because if you don't clean the brush properly, then you've got this stuff dried in there and it's gunked in. What I use when I'm spraying it is, I even use it if I'm doing silicone in a flat plate mold.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do a skin of Baldies or Glatzen in the mold, and I use these Preval sprayers that I pick up at Home Depot. It comes with a little glass jar and a little aerosol top that goes on it like a spray can for $7 or $8, and you can buy the refill aerosols for like $4 and get a really nice, if you've thinned your Baldies properly, you get a really nice fine spray out of these sprayers, and when it's used up, you just toss it.
Okay. We should look into that. Maybe we'll find some pictures and post it on the blog post and have some links in the show notes as well, because there may be something equivalent in the UK or somewhere else in Europe that we could find over here. I've seen those kind of pump-up ones, they're like a bottle within a bottle. So one of the bottles is used to, you pump it up and it has air pressure in it, and the other bottle has inside it a reservoir for whatever fluid, and then basically you can turn, presumably, any liquid you can put in there or anything you can turn into a liquid.
You want to have several layers of a really fine coating of the Baldies in your mold so that you don't have thick and thin spots that are going to affect the way the appliance moves once it's glued on.
Yeah. I mean, I've got some video of me airbrushing cat plastic if anyone's interested.
I'll bet that's exciting.
I'll put, it's amazing. You watch it evaporate, it's amazing. I was just trying to think if you wanted to see it done and you don't have an airbrush, you just want to see it done, you could see this being done. But it is there's a bit of a knack to sort of doing it calmly in such a way as to try and get an even spray.
Yeah.
Which is probably more difficult with an airbrush than it is with this spray you're saying, because it probably sprays quite a big spray pattern. Which is another reason why I like it being so thinned down with solvents, because you can really pump that and know you've got it everywhere.
Yeah. Well, you can adjust the amount of the spray with the airbrush. That with the Preval sprayers, you push it down and you get what you get. With an airbrush, you can adjust how much the air pressure is, or how much material's coming through the gun by how far you pull the trigger back, which would be an advantage with an airbrush over one of these disposable sprayers.
Yeah. I mean, I use an Iwata HPCS, I think it is. And this is one I've had about 10 or 12 years, and I put cat plastic through it pretty much every month since I've had it. And it's still all the original parts. It's fine. I mean, if it does get a bit blocked, I just dismantle it and throw some solvents.
Yeah, I've got a single action Pache that essentially the same thing.
And it works really well.
It works really well. And
the only trouble with it is it's a gravity fed. The dashpot's on the top, so it's gravity fed. So you don't get a lot of gear in there. But what I did do was I posted a picture of it on Instagram. I cut down a syringe and whacked it in the end with some plastiline to create a seal, just so I could pour a quarter pint of cat plastic in it. And just because I got bored of constantly refilling it. But that's the only thing with it. If you're doing a lot of molds, it helps. If you can get one of those spray guns they use for tanning.
Well, that's what's nice about the Preval sprayers is because it's a 4-ounce jar that attaches to this little aerosol, so you can fill that puppy up with 4 ounces of thinned down cat plastic and go to town.
Amazing. That sounds really good. I want to know if we do something like that. And then Preval, how do you spell it? Preval?
Preval.
Okay, Preval. We'll look that up. Because if we can find something similar over here, I'll eat that shit.
Yeah, no,
I'll just buy a bunch of them.
Well, when I go to Home Depot, I'll buy like a dozen of the refills at a time. I'll send you one along with the Girl Scout cookies.
Okay, that sounds amazing. Then I can eat the cookies while I put my cat plastic.
There you go.
Because the thing is, a lot of people listen to this podcast who are not in the States or in the UK, and if they find an equivalent or a different name or a different supplier or something somewhere else in the world, it's good if you let us know, because we can update the blog post with that, because there's going to be someone else in your neck of the woods that maybe wants the same thing, and they need to know it.
Maybe Scandinavia has something that's better than all of it.
Exactly. So it would be good to spread that around a bit, because otherwise it gets a little bit kind of like, well, I don't have a Lowe's, because like you mentioned Home Depot, and I'm like, I don't know if we have one of that. The nearest we have in England is something like B&Q, or Homebase, and I'll be interested to know if they have something like that. Which department would it be in? Would it be in the paint department?
Paint department, yeah.
Okay, so maybe I'll have a look and see if we've got something similar to that over here. But yeah, so with spraying cat plastic, one thing, I mean, some people, like if you're doing a flat plate silicone mold, you can kind of brush it in. You could use like a wide paintbrush and just paint it in conventionally. But I have found that I learned this to my cost years ago. One of the first courses I ever taught when I was doing this, we painted onto resin face cast with brushes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was basically cat plastic that had been thinned down 4 or 5 parts solvent to 1 part cat plastic. And we painted it on with a brush, and we ran the pieces, and then we opened them up, and basically the cat plastic stuck to the core and to the mold, and it ruined the piece getting it out. It didn't bond at all to the silicone. It stuck to the core and the mold. And that only happened when I painted on with an airbrush, painted on with a conventional brush. When I airbrush it on, it worked really well. So
Interesting.
I think basically what happens is when you paint it on with a brush, you deposit a much thicker layer. So the solvent is on the surface for longer. Not a lot longer, because it still evaporates quite quickly, because it is acetone.
Yeah.
But because it was a thicker layer, it had time to get past the any release agent that was on there and make friends with the core surface and the mold surface, and it basically bit into the resin surface.
Which
so that
goes into why it's so important to make sure that you release your mold.
Well,
properly.
release your molds, but also don't paint it on with a bloody paintbrush.
Yeah.
You can with a silicone mold. It works okay with silicone. So if you're making little flat plate silicone molds,
yeah,
you can brush those in. Yeah, but with a core that's made of something like resin, you kind of have to airbrush it on, because otherwise the amount you leave when you paint it with a brush is so thick. It's thick enough, even if it takes a minute to evaporate, that's plenty of time for to migrate into the surface of the mold. Whereas when you airbrush, the amount you spray is so thin, which means you need to do more layers, but it just means that it's almost dry by the time it lands on the surface, and it doesn't have time to eat into the surface of the mold.
Exactly.
So what I've started doing now, it's like almost like a nervous tick that I do. I spray the core and the mold right to the edge, way, way past where the edge of the appliance is, right to the edge of the core of the mold itself, so that I can actually lift it with a pin and check, because if I can pull it away with a pin now, I know that it's coming away from the surface of the mold or the core okay. Whereas if it's not coming away easily now, I already know that it's not going to work later, so there's no point in going through the whole filling it with silicone, clamping it, waiting, and then opening up, only to find out. So it's always worth checking to make sure that your cat plastic is able to come away, that it's been sufficiently released before you go any further. Then kind of tick that box.
Yeah. And also, if you're doing a silicone gel appliance, the more deadener you've got in your silicone, the stickier your silicone is going to be, and the easier it's going to be for the silicone to want to stay attached to the ball cap, to the cat plastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that can happen. That's known as delamination. I've had that with a few pieces, either because the silicone just didn't bond to the cat plastic, or more often, it's probably because the mold of the core wasn't released well. So out of the two surfaces, the silicone or the mold, it ended up bonding with the mold surface. So it ended up delaminating that way. So again, like you said before, you need to really make sure that you well release
and
your mold.
The more detail you have and undercuts in the texture of your mold, the more likely you are to experience some delamination when you're trying to demold.
Yeah, it just kind of grips it, doesn't it? A mechanical kind of grip. So, release like Billio. But it's probably worth mentioning, although it's incredibly self-serving for you to mention your bonder. You got some pro.
Yeah, Maddie Singer and I have partnered up on a product that he came up with that we're calling ProBond Primer, which it's like on a microscopic level, it's working like Velcro, where you spray the ProBond Primer onto the cap plastic, and when you pour in your uncured silicone, it's like microscopic Velcro, and it creates a permanent bond between the cap plastic and the silicone when it sets up, that you essentially can't have delamination.
Mm-hmm. And not just cap plastic either, is it? I mean, you've done a little video again.
Yeah, no, you can bond silicone to pretty much anything. I bonded it to the bottom of a metal coffee can, by spraying the Pro Bond onto the can and then pouring silicone onto that after the Pro Bond was dry, and couldn't get the silicone up without tearing it.
So that's all good. So we'll put a little link to that, because you've done a video, I think, of that to show, because it's kind of difficult to necessarily wrap your head around it if you haven't seen it done. So I think if we put a link to the video, then people can check that out. But it's worth it, I think, because sometimes on the back of pieces you get like the cat plastic kind of, you take a piece off and you're left with a layer of cat plastic stuck to the face with the glue. So you pulled the piece off, but there's still cat plastic on the skin. Whereas if you spread it with this, presumably that doesn't happen.
Eliminate that as well.
So that's kind of cool. I think it's probably worth just mentioning as well why we use cat plastic at all, because some people are like, why do I need cat plastic? So I think it's probably worth just discussing a little bit about why it's necessary to use cat plastic when you're using silicone gels. Because again, if you haven't actually handled silicone gel, it's kind of difficult to get your head around. So, but
it's very soft, but it's really sticky.
It's really sticky. If you want it soft, which you kind of need it to be soft, otherwise there's no point in using it. It's too stiff. It needs to be really squidgy and soft. It needs to be as soft as the skin that it's going to be sitting on, basically. So if you think of a big flabby neck, if that's where your piece is going, like on me, there's no point in having a piece of hard rubber on a soft neck, because it looks fake when the neck moves and the piece doesn't. Then you can see it. So it needs to be very, very soft. So,
on the plus side, the sticky silicone gel will adhere quite nicely to your skin. But so will everything else, from cat hair.
But it's getting it out the mold. That's the hard part.
Also getting it out of the mold is going to be tough.
If you can imagine that. Yeah, if you can imagine like a chicken breast with a consistency of snot that sticks to you like it was made of sellotape. Imagine that. And it's like you can't get it out the mold and then put it on a core, because every time you touch it, it sticks to your hand or whatever, and the very, very fine edges that you sculpted would just get ruined. So you actually need the benefits of the soft squishiness, but you don't need the surface tackiness.
Yeah, I think I would think trying to get silicone gel out of a mold is probably even worse than trying to get uncured silicone out of a mold.
Yeah, at least that has the courtesy of being liquid enough to pour most of it out.
Yeah.
And that's not a pretty job.
Something, trust me, you don't want to have to experience.
No. So the reason you would put cat plastic in, you would spray cat plastic on your core and on your mold, and then you put your silicone in and then close the mold up, or you can close the mold up in advance and inject your silicone in. But the point is, when the piece comes out, the actual surface is cat plastic, whereas the inside has all the benefits of translucent squidgy silicone. So it feels and looks like skin, but the actual surface you're touching is not a silicone surface, it's a cat plastic surface. And that cat plastic surface does two things, really. Three things. It stops you from, it being sticky so you can actually handle it, but it also gives you a surface that glue and paint will stick to.
It makes painting a breeze.
Because if you think about it, the reason we make molds out of silicon is because stuff doesn't stick to silicon. And that's great. But if you're making appliances out of silicon, it's insane, because now neither the glue nor the makeup is sticking to the silicon. So
not for very long anyway.
Not for very long. So by having a cat plastic surface, you actually give it a membrane, or like an actual surface, which is not silicon, but is bonding to the silicon inside. And then you can paint that up and make it up. And the makeup should stay stuck to the cat plastic, and on the back, the glue should, stick to the skin. So it basically acts as a go-between between the silicon and the skin. And then the last thing it does, which is incredibly useful, is that you can dissolve the edges away. The cat plastic edges will actually melt with the solvent that's appropriate for it. So if you've used standard Baldies, for example, then it's acetone. If it's the super Baldies, then it's alcohol. But the point is, you can melt the edge to nothing. So you make it with a thin edge anyway, but you can literally melt it away. Whereas if it's a bare silicon piece with no cat plastic, you can't melt that edge, because there isn't anything that's going to safely melt silicon. It's not like gelatine, which you can melt. You can't melt silicon.
No.
It's,
cured latex, cured silicone. Once they're done, that's it. And the beautiful thing if you've got multiple overlapping pieces, because you can blend those edges with just a teeny bit of solvent, whether it's alcohol or acetone, now it's just tied your whole makeup together. Seamlessly, literally seamlessly.
Yeah. But like you say, you've got to be careful with your overlapping pieces if you're using the solvent to make sure you don't put too much on. I mean, when I say you need solvent, you don't need a lot. For all of this melting away business, you still have to make it with a really thin edge. I mean, we're talking about much, much thinner than, tissue paper. It's feather thin.
And it's very easy for enough to become too much.
Yeah. I mean, I notice it with cat plastic. A lot of people, when they start doing it, is they'll spray, what they think is the right amount of cat plastic on, and then, they check, and because it stretches, it feels very thin, they end up putting more on. And then the next day when they open up their piece, it feels really, really thick. And it's not that it got thicker, it's just that actually it was thick enough when you did 3 or 4 layers. You just needed to leave it for a couple of hours to firm up, because cat plastic toughens with time. And if you delaminate it, or if you open up your mold too soon, it's still too soft. You really do need to leave cat plastic, a few hours really to mature, preferably overnight before you open up if you can, I think.
Yeah,
then
it's
full
very
12
easy
hours.
to be impatient and you want to see how this thing turned out, but give it time to reach full strength.
Yeah, so I like the Baldies and the Super Baldies. I use them both in different ways. One thing I would say about the Super Baldies from a practical point of view is it tends to cobweb a lot more when you're spraying it. So you kind of need to make sure it's very, very thinned down with solvent, and the pressure's not too high. Otherwise it'll just fill the room with tiny little cobwebs. And naturally, if you're spraying a cat plastic at all, make sure you're doing it with ventilation or extraction, and that you're wearing a mask, a respirator, because you don't want to be breathing in these fumes.
No.
You are responsible for your own health and safety and for those around you. So please do take care and wear appropriate.
Yes, 99% alcohol and acetone are not good for your lungs.
No, don't be breathing that stuff in. So you will need that in addition to, the airbrush and the compressor and everything. We're going to do that, which is why painting it in with a brush, you've still got fumes to deal with, but it's not as airborne as spraying it. So that's good. And with the cobwebbing issue, one little tip, I think, sometimes when you're spraying a mold that has a lot of detail, sometimes you find you get little cobwebs happening between the peaks inside the mold. You get a couple of high points, you may find it's cobwebby. What you can do is go in with a cotton bud or a Q-tip that's dunked in the cat plastic, and then just tap, the middles of those strands of cobweb, and that should melt it away. But at the same time, it also replaces any cat plastic that's melt away, because you're using cat plastic with solvent mixed in as the thing to break up the edge. What you don't want to do is pull at it or pick at it, because if you grab it with anything, even, a pair of tweezers or something, you'll end up just peeling the whole thing out like a sheet, and you'll have to start again. So, proceed with caution.
Good advice.
The other thing I have done is actually, when I've had multiples over a very large area, is actually spray pure solvent on it. And again, that does the same thing. It kind of melts the little strands, but without actually touching it. You're not going to get your clumsy fingers in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, you have to just be careful not to get too much of a spray, because it'll dissolve
everything
through
away.
All that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, when you're making up with the, alcohol-based makeup on top of alcohol solvent cat plastic, I found if you're careful and you don't use too much, it doesn't completely melt it away. What is nice, it does kind of etch into the surface. It's just if you pool it or you put way too much on, then you will actually melt it away completely, with a big patch where there's no more cat plastic. And that's not good. So proceed with caution. So maybe if you're trying cat plastic for the first time, maybe go with the acetone one and then progress to the alcohol-based one later.
Yeah, I actually think the acetone ones are a little bit more forgiving.
Yeah. They are. Although one thing I have noticed is it's very hard to get a thick edge with the alcohol-based cat plastic. It's almost like
and you can't.
It breaks down a lot better when you melt it away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you have to be careful if you're doing actual bald caps with the acetone soluble cat plastic. You can try to feather where the edges of your cap are going to be, so that you aren't going to be working with such a thick bit of cat plastic, because you want to make sure that the edges disappear once you have glued it down.
Yeah, I've done that when you're making your bull caps. Yeah, you don't need it to be a tough thickness everywhere. You only need it really at the back of the head, where it's going to stretch and where it's going to blend. You kind of want it to be a bit thinner, so you can apply it in several layers. and accumulate your thickness. So you start, it's the same with latex when you're making latex things. You know, a lot of people think, how do you make the edge thin? And it's like, well, you make it thin by not putting too much latex on. If you're making a piece, you go right to your edge with your first layer, then you creep back with your second layer and creep back with your third layer. So by the time you're done your 10th layer, you're about 2 inches away from the edge. So it naturally tapers because you're not putting it to the same point each time.
Right.
Like you say, you've actually got to construct it with a thin edge. You can't melt it and make it disappear. You can't melt away a crappy edge. You've got to make it thin to begin with so that it can disappear to nothing. If your edge is, 2 millimeters thick, you ain't melting that away. You've screwed up.
You're going to be able to see that. So with our cap plastic, we got 2 types of cap plastic, acetone soluble and alcohol soluble, several different manufacturers, Baldies, Super Baldies, Bald FX, Glatzen L, Watermelon. You can get them any number of places, Friends Beauty, Nigel's, Mold Life, Neil's Materials. It's all over the place, Michael Davey.
And Pierce Composites have got 2. They've got, I think it's called ProCap Plastic.
ProCap Plastic?
And ProCap Plus, I think, is the alcohol base.
Cap Plus.
ProCap and ProCap Plus, yeah.
So that's it for another edition of Battles with Bits of Rubber with Stuart and Todd. Email us at stuartandtodd@gmail.com. Check out our Facebook page, which we just started, Battles with Bits of Rubber, and let us know what you thought, topics that you'd like us to cover. Subscribe to us on iTunes.
You'll find us on iTunes, and SoundCloud is another popular one as well.
SoundCloud, yeah.
I am myself an Android user. I don't have iTunes, so I use an app called Pocket Casts, which I've got about 30, because I'm a podcast addict, so I listen to like Serial and, a lot of NPR stuff that's on there. So Pocket Cast is a good one for Android users who are not iTunes friendly.
But either way, subscribe. Please subscribe. Leave a review. Let us know how we're doing. And then pass this along to a kindred FX soul.
Got a friend that likes this stuff? Tell them about us. That'd be lovely.
Keep listening so we can keep doing this, because we like doing it. And we like learning new stuff. So talk to you soon.
Take care, mate. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.